Sorry, squirrels. I about went another day without reading. Oh my gosh. And I have a caramel stuck to the roof of my store-bought tea. Thank you, but I don't need anything, for I brought all sorts of home comforts with me. Oh, Fan, you ought to have seen my triumphal entry into the city, sitting among my goods and chattels, chattels, in a farmer's cart. Polly's laugh was so infectious that everyone smiled and forgot to be shocked at her performance. Yes, she added, I kept wishing I could meet you just to see your horrified face when you saw me sitting on my little sofa with boxes and bundles all around me. A bird cage on one side, a fishing basket with a kitten's head popping in and out of the hole on the other side, and jolly old Mr. Brown in his blue frock perched on a keg of apples in front. It was a lovely bright day, and I enjoyed the ride immensely, for we had all sorts of adventures. Oh, tell about it, begged Maud, when the general laugh at Polly's picture had subsided. Well, in the first place, we forgot my ivy, and Kitty came running after me with it. Then we started again, but were soon stopped by a great shouting, and there was Will racing down the hill, waving a pillow in one hand and a squash pie in the other. How we did laugh when he came up and explained that our neighbor, old Mrs. Dodd, had sent in a hop, H-O-P, pillow for me in case of headache, and a pie to begin housekeeping with. She seemed so disappointed at being too late that Will promised to get them to me if he ran all the way to town. The pillow was easily disposed of, but that pie, I do believe it was stowed in every part of the wagon and never stayed anywhere. I found it in my lap, then on the floor, next upside down among the books. Then just on the point of coasting off a trunk into the road, and at last it landed in my rocking chair. Such a remarkable pie as it was, too, for in spite of all its wanderings, it never got spilt or broken, and we finally ate it for lunch, in order to be left in peace. Next, my Kitty got away, and I had a chase over walls and brooks before I got her, while Mr. Brown sat shaking with fun to see me run. We finished off by having the bookshelves tumble on our heads as we went down a hill, and losing my chair off behind as we went up a hill. A shout made us pause, and looking back, there was the poor little chair rocking all by itself in the middle of the road, while a small boy sat on the fence and whooped. It was great fun, I do assure you. And Polly had run on in her lively way, not because she thought her adventures amounted to much, but from a wish to cheer up her friends, who had struck her as looking rather dull and out of sorts, especially Mr. Shaw. And when she saw him lean back in his chair with the old hearty laugh, she was satisfied and blessed the unlucky pie for amusing him. Oh, Polly, you do tell such interesting things, sighed Maud, wiping her eyes. I wish I'd met you. I'd have given you 3 cheers and a tiger, for it must have been an imposing spectacle, said Tom. No, you wouldn't. You'd have whisked round the corner when you saw me coming, or have stared straight before you, uttering unconscious of the young woman in the baggage wagon. Polly laughed in his face just as she used to do when she said that, and in spite of the doubt cast upon his courtesy, Tom rather liked it, though he had nothing to say for himself but a reproachful, "Now, Polly, that's too bad." True, nevertheless. You must come and see my pets, Maud, for my cat and bird live together as happily as a brother and sister, added Polly. turning to Maud, who devoured every word she said. "That's not saying much for them," muttered Tom, feeling that Polly ought to address more of her conversation to him. "And Polly knows what she's talking about. Her brothers appreciate their sisters," observed Fanny in her sharp tone. "And Polly appreciates her brothers. Don't forget to add that, ma'am," answered Tom. "And did I tell you that Will was going to college?" broke in Polly to avert the rising storm. "Hope he'll enjoy himself," observed Tom with the air of a man who had passed through all the mysteries and reached that stage of sublime indifference which juniors seem to pride themselves upon. Eat. "I think he will. He is so fond of study and is so anxious to improve every opportunity. I only hope he won't overwork and get sick, as so many boys do," said Simple Polly with such a respectful belief in the eager thirst for knowledge of collegians as a class that Tom regarded the deluded girl with a smile of lofty pity from the heights of his vast and varied experience. "Guess he won't hurt himself. I'll see that he don't study too hard." And Tom's eyes twinkled as they used to do when he planned his boyish pranks. "I'm afraid you can't be trusted as a guide if various rumors I've heard are true," said Polly, looking up at him with a wistful expression that caused his face to assume the sobriety of an owl's. "Base slanders. I'm as steady as a clock, an ornament to my class, and a model young man, ain't I, Mother?" And Tom patted her thin cheek with a caressing hand, sure of one firm friend in her. For when he ceased to be a harum-scarum boy, Mrs. Shaw began to take great pride in her son, and he, missing Grandma, tried to fill her place with his feeble mother. "Yes, dear, you are all I could ask," said Mrs. Shaw, looking up at him with such affection and confidence in her eyes that Polly gave Tom the first approving look she had vouchsafed him since she came. Probably screwed that up. Why Tom should look troubled and turn grave all at once she couldn't understand, but she liked to see him stroke his mother's cheek so softly as he stood with his head resting on the high back of her chair, for Polly fancied that he felt the man's pity for her weakness and was learning a son's patient love for a mother who had much to bear with him. "I'm so glad you're going to be here all winter, for we're to be very gay, and I shall enjoy taking you around with me," began Fanny, forgetting Polly's plan for a moment. Polly shook her head decidedly. "It sounds very nice, but it can't be done, Fan, for I've come to work, not play, to save, not spend, and parties will be quite out of the question for me." "You don't intend to work all the time? Without a bit of fun, I hope," cried Fanny, dismayed at the idea. I mean to do what I've undertaken, and not to be tempted away from my purpose by anything. I shouldn't be fit to give lessons if I was up late, should I? And how far would my earnings go towards dress, carriages, and all the little expenses which come if I set up for a young lady in society? I can't do both, and I'm not going to try, but I can pick up bits of fun as I go along and be contented with free concerts and lectures, seeing you pretty often. And every Sunday Will is to spend with me, so I shall have quite as much dissipation as is good for me. If you don't come to my parties, I'll never forgive you, said Fanny, as Polly paused, while Tom chuckled inwardly at the idea of calling visits. Tom chuckled inwardly at the idea of calling visits from a brother dissipation. Any small party where it will do to wear plain black silk I can come to, but the big ones mustn't be thought of, thank you. It was charming to see the resolution of Polly's face when she said that, for she knew her weakness had beyond. Her weakness, and beyond that black silk she had determined not to go. Fanny said no more, for she felt quite sure that Polly would relent when the time came, and she planned to give her a pretty dress for a Christmas present, so that one excuse should be removed. I say, Polly, won't you give some of us fellas music lessons? Somebody wants me to play, and I'd rather learn of you than any senior twankydillo, said Tom, who didn't find the conversation interesting. Oh, yes. If any of you boys honestly want to learn and will behave yourselves, I'll take you. But I shall charge extra, answered Polly, with the wicked sparkle of the eye, though her face was quite sober and her tone delightfully businesslike. Why, Polly, Tom isn't a boy, he's 20, and he says I must treat him with respect. Besides, he's engaged and does not put on such airs, broke in Maud, who regarded her brother as a venerable being. Who is the little girl? Asked Polly, taking the news as a joke. Trix. Trix, why didn't you know it? Answered Maud, as if it had been an event of national importance. No, is it true, Fan? And Polly turned to look at her friend with a face full of surprise, while Tom struck an imposing attitude and affected absence of mind. I forgot to tell you in my last letter. It's just out, and we don't like it very well, observed Fanny, who would have preferred to be engaged first herself. It's a very nice thing, and I'm perfectly satisfied, announced Mrs. Shaw, rousing from a slight doze. Polly looks as if she didn't believe it. As if she didn't believe it. Haven't I the appearance of the happiest man alive? Asked Tom, wondering if it could be pity which he saw in the steady eyes fixed on him. No, I don't think you have, she said slowly. How the deuce should a man look then? Cried Tom, rather nettled at her sober reception of the grand news. As he had learned to care for someone a great deal more than for himself, answered Polly, with sudden color in her cheeks and a sudden softening of the voice as her eyes turned away from Tom, who was the picture of a complacent dandy from the topmost curl of his auburn head to the tips of his aristocratic boots. Tommy's quenched. I agree with you, Polly. I never liked Trix, and I hope it's only a boy and girl fancy that will soon die a natural death, said Mr. Shaw, who seemed to find it difficult to help falling into a brown study in spite of lively chatter going on about him. Shaw Jr. being highly incensed at the disrespectful manner in which manner in which his engagement was treated, tried to assume a superb air of indifference, and finding that a decided failure, was about to stroll out of the room with a comprehensive nod when his mother called after him, "Where are you going, dear?" "To see Trix, of course. Goodbye, Polly." And Mr. Thomas departed, hoping that by the skilful change of tone from ardent impatience to condescending coolness he had impressed what did I say? Condescending coolness. He had impressed one hearer at last with the fact that he regarded Trix as the star of his existence, and Polly as a presuming little chit. CHIT. If he could have heard her laugh and Fanny's remarks, his wrath would have boiled over. Fortunately, he was spared the trial and went away hoping that the coquetries of his Trix would make him forget Polly's look when she answered his question. "My dear, that boy is the most deluded creature you ever saw," began Fanny as soon as the front door banged. "Belle and Trix both tried to catch him, and the slyest got him, for in spite of his airs he is as soft-hearted as a baby. You see, Trix has broken off 2 engagements already, and the 3rd time she got jilted herself. Such a fuss as she made. I declare it really was Trix, the 3rd time such a fuss as she made. I declare it really was absurd. But I do think she felt it very much, for she wouldn't go out at all, and got him. Darn, where am I at? Of course I'm okay. In spite of it, 2 engagements right there, I declare it really was absurd. But I do think she felt it very much, for she wouldn't go out at all, and got thin and pale and blue, and was really quite touching. I pitied her and had her hear a good deal, and Tom took her part. He always does stand up for the crushed ones, and that's good of him. I allow. Well, she did the Forsaken very prettily. Let Tom amuse her and lead him on. Forsaken very prettily. Let Tom amuse her and led him on till the poor fellow lost his wits. And finding her crying one day, and in quotations, about her hat, which wasn't becoming, he thought she was mourning for Mr. Banks, and so to comfort her, the goose proposed. Help, I've lost my place again. Proposed. That was all she wanted. She snapped him up at once, and there he is in a nice scrape, for since her engagement she is as gay as ever. Flirts awfully with anyone who comes along, and keeps Tom in a fume all the time. I really don't think he cares for her. Cares for her half as much as he makes believe, but he'll stand by her through thick and thin rather than do as Banks did. Poor Tom, was all Polly said when Fan had poured the story into her car. As they sat whispering in the sofa corner. My only consolation is that Trix will break off the affair before springing. She always does, so that she may be free for the summer campaign. It won't hurt Tom, but I hate to have him make a fool of himself out of pity. For he is more of a man than he seems, and I don't want anyone to plague him. No one but yourself, said Polly, smiling. Y'all, I'm going to have to stop there because I'm getting so sleepy. I'm so sorry. I'll try to do better and read earlier tomorrow. I'll try. And tomorrow's Thursday, so I won't be live tomorrow, but I'll see you in the YouTube streets. Be sweet, don't be ugly. Love ya. Good night.